This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of February 29th, 2016. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you watch this video, just check out the description below this video where you'll find links to download each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here we have Trail Ranger, which is a font. These fonts are provided in OpenType font format, and I have them opened up inside Illustrator here to show it. So there's 2 main variations with these fonts, and this top one right here is called Trail Ranger Regular, and the one below it is called Trail Ranger Narrow. And off to the side here, there's also a shadow version of the regular one, as well as a shadow version of the narrow one. So I'll show you a way to quickly combine these two to give a nice offset shadow in just a second here. But I'm going to check out the first one up top here, which is the regular version for Trail Ranger. So as I zoom in closer on here, you can see that this has a very handmade appearance to it. It also has a little bit of a vintage vibe going on, and I'll zoom in even closer so you can get a good idea of the overall letter quality and line quality on these. So overall, the execution looks really good, and there are some wavering lines that give it a bit more of a handmade appearance, but they aren't super significant, and there isn't a really strong distressing on these either. So it just looks like they were handmade, but also that they were handmade quite carefully, so there isn't a lot of like wavering lines or anything like that. And below that we have the numbers 0 through 9, as well as a few different special characters. If I go to type and then glyphs near the top here, you can see everything that's included in this set. So it's fairly basic in terms of the letters and punctuation, but it should be good enough for at least English users to go in here and type out what they have to if you're using this as a headline font. And it's also worth noting that this is just an uppercase letter font, so there aren't any lowercase variations for these letters to pick from. And on this particular one, when I typed out in uppercase, for whatever reason, it actually had a little bit bigger spacing between letters, which I wasn't sure if that was intentional or not, but in any case, the actual letters when you type them out are the exact same. And below that, I typed up Free Goods Roundup so you can see how it looks typed up into a sentence. So the kerning between the letters is pretty generous, so you can feel free to tighten that up if you want to, but it also looks good as it is. There is some inconsistencies between the letters when it comes to spacing, but since this is a very handmade looking font, I don't see that as a big issue. And below that, we have the narrow version of this font, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this one, but basically it's the same letters as up at the top here. They've just been shrunk down a little bit in terms of the width that they take up, which makes this font more narrow and thus the name for it. So off to the right here, we also have these drop shadows. So it's very easy to give your work a nice little shadow around it if you want to go in there and do that. So what I like to do is I just type out whatever it is using the shadow font. So I'll just use these exact letters right here and then hit Control C or Command C on a Mac to copy it, and then Control F or Command F on a Mac to paste it in place. And I'm going to change the font from regular shadow to just be regular. So as you can see right here, it put them in the perfect spot to give a nice little outline around the sides here that give it kind of an outlined or shadowed appearance. And you can of course change the fill colors for each of these 2 different elements if that's something you want to do. So right now I have the back outline selected, so I'll make that something like a really dark blue, just so it stands out from this a little bit. But it's really easy to go in there and do that and quickly overlay these. Once you have the type set up and kerned the way you want it and everything looks good, you can then feel free to give it this kind of cool shadow. But that's it for this font. It's a well executed display font that should be really good if you have a bit more of a vintage or explore themed design or illustration that you're working on. So if you like this font and you think you'll get some use out of it, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up are 10 high resolution wood textures. This is a collection of 10 different wood textures in JPEG format, so I have them all opened up inside Photoshop here to show. And if I go to image size, you can see these are actually pretty large at just a little bit over 4,200 pixels wide and almost 3,000 pixels high. So they should be plenty big for pretty much anything on the web and most print applications as well. So I'm just going to scroll through the list of 10 different textures that are included here. And as you can see, there is going to be a pretty diverse selection of different types of wood images. So the ones at the beginning were wood boards, where these are cross sections of an actual trunk of a tree, I'm assuming. And there's some really cool textures going on inside these as you get a little bit closer as well, like the cracking on the inside here and the color variations. There's some pretty neat stuff going on. And there's also some like this one right here, where if you're trying to pull a really hard wood edge, you can desaturate this, for example, and then bring up levels and really just tweak this until you get a very harsh looking wood texture that you could then overlay on some type or something like that. And as you can tell, at least in this particular wood example, it really did a good job of pulling out these different lines to show that wood texture. So it should be fairly easy for you to go in there and do that yourself. And this one's a really nice contrasty wooden board texture. I could see a nice illustration or type using this as a texture on the top of it, especially if you made it look a little bit like this one right here and just knocked it out as a texture mask. You might get some really cool effects doing something similar to that. Here's another one that's a bunch of wooden boards, looks like a new house construction or something, because you can actually see some marker writing on these boards still. And here's the next one. This one actually has a really cool texture going on inside of it where you can see these linear patterns on this particular wood. I don't know the technical term for that, but the end result is a really cool looking texture. And here's the next one. This one would be really good if you want to overlay some type on top of it or an illustration or logo on top of it, something like that, where you want a nice big wooden background that isn't too busy or too saturated in color so that it works as a background a little bit better than something a bit more overbearing. And here is the last of the 10, and probably one of my favorites of the 10 as well, because there's some really cool patterns going on inside this wood itself. So that's it for this pack. There's 10 different wood textures in JPEG format, and as you saw, there's a really nice selection of different ones to choose from. So if you're on the hunt for some wooden textures, then I definitely recommend that you pick this one up. Just be sure to do it this week though, while it's still free. Next up is Leaves Set. This is a collection of leaf illustrations as well as different seamless patterns using these leaves, and the files included are EPS as well as JPEG, but to get the most use out of this set, I'd really recommend using the EPS files because those are vector and the increased scalability will be super useful for you to use. And also if you're trying to pull a singular leaf and you don't want it to be on a white background and you use the JPEG as opposed to this EPS, you'd have to go around and clip out all these leaves, which would take you quite a bit of time, where if you use the EPS file, that's already done for you and super easy to do. So here's the first one, which should give you a pretty good idea of the overall illustration style on these different leaf sets. So there's a nice variance of different shapes of leaves here, and also some different color palettes that you could mix and match, or even change these colors to be your own custom colors if that's something you want to do to make these even more unique to you. But overall here we have a pretty nice selection of different leaves to choose from. And here's the second page, which is essentially the same thing as this first page here, although there are some different leaf options, and of course the main difference being is that many of these are just outlines and don't have a fill inside of them. And it's also very easy to click on these outlined leaves and just double click on that fill and change the color to be something else if you do want to customize the colors of these, although I do really like the color palette that they chose on this by default. And here are 6 different options for hearts filled with leaves, and as far as the patterns of these hearts go, the top 3 are the same and the bottom 3 right here are the same, although the color variations are obviously quite a bit different, but these are very complete graphics just by themselves. So if I go in and check this one out a little bit closer here, you can see they did a really nice job of combining all these leaf shapes as well as these background splatters. And you can of course ungroup this stuff, if I can do this without touching everything here, and then keep on ungrouping it until eventually it's ungrouped enough to pull what you're looking for. So in this case I was trying to pull off this little splatter right here just so you can see what this looks like. I'll make it something a little bit darker so it's a bit easier to see on my screen here. But if you're looking for some vector splatters that actually look pretty darn good on their own, then you can of course pull these off and just use these on their own without all the leaves overlaid on top of them, in case that's something you want to do. So it's always nice when a set has a super focus, like in this case leaves, but it also has these really nice vector splatters kind of hidden in the background here that you can then pull off and use as well. So here's the next one, and this one's actually a seamless repeat, so I went ahead and repeated it just to show that all these repeats do work and they work very well. So this looks very organic when it's actually repeated out. I mean, you can tell it is a repeat, but it's not super obvious, so they did a good job of putting this one together. And this one is also a seamless repeat. If I check out the one before, you can tell it's a little bit different pattern, but using similar elements. And of course the color palette has changed, although you can of course just select the background, for example, and change that to be something different if you're looking to customize this a little bit further, and it's really easy to go in there and do that. So feel free to go in here and change up the colors of these as you need to. And here's the next one, also a seamless repeating pattern with a little bit of a desaturated color palette that kind of makes me think of fall a little bit. And here's the next one. This one is also a seamless repeat, and I really like these large leaf shapes in the background with the leaves on top overlaid. It creates a pretty cool pattern that really reminds me of textile design. So I think they did a really good job of composing this and making it be something pretty interesting to look at using these different leaf shapes. And this is the last of them, another seamless repeating pattern. This one's bright and fun, so if you're looking for something a little bit brighter with a somewhat more sparse amount of leaves on the inside, then this one might be a pretty solid choice for you to go in and use. And of course with all these seamless repeating patterns, you can of course just ungroup these and then grab a singular leaf if that's something you want to do, or even just start rearranging these inside this artboard right here, and then you will customize the way this looks a little bit. Just be careful if you move something on the left and the right that you do all of that at the same time. So if I were to grab, for example, this leaf right here and then the other side of it, which is the repeat, you want to move these just up and down, but make sure that they stay completely together so that the actual repeat continues to work. Although if you do that with anything on the inside here, you don't have to worry about that because it'll repeat just fine as it's not going over one of these edges. But that's it for this set. If you've been on the hunt for some nice vector leaves and leaf patterns, then this one is certainly something worth picking up. Just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Cremia, which is an HTML portfolio. This is a responsive portfolio theme, and it's using HTML and CSS, and it's not using a content management system like WordPress, so you won't have to worry about that. Although I will note that this is the example when you look on the product page. When you actually download this from Creative Market, there won't be any images because these are all just placeholder images. So when you download this and open up the index file for the first time, it might seem a bit broken because these images are not here. But once you code in all the different images, it should work for you just fine. And as you can tell on this particular theme, the images are really the highlight, where if you click on a particular image, it'll make that a full screen. And if you scroll up and down, it doesn't appear to do anything, but there are these up and down arrows where you can then sort through different images that are also on this website. And as you can tell, there is room for titles as well as text. I'm not sure if you had a whole bunch of text, if you could then scroll down to read all of that. But in this case, when I scroll up and down like I'm doing right now, it doesn't seem to be having any effect. But as you can see, it's very easy to go in here and just sort through all the different images that are included on this portfolio. So this seems perfect for photographers, just given the nature of these huge big screen images. But of course, for designers and illustrators, this could also work very well if you want your images to be displayed on a full page like these are. Just be mindful though that if these images are being shown on really big screens, you're going to want to use some fairly high quality images so they don't look too distorted when they're shown as large as this. And to exit out of this view, you just hit this little X button right here, which brings you back to the main page. And I'll scroll back up the top here. I'm going to quickly refresh it as well, just so you can see there is a loading animation where it says portfolio and then it gives the name of that portfolio. So I'll assume that you can replace the text for both of those as this page is loaded up to be appropriate to whatever it is that you want it to be. I'd also guess if you're good enough, you could totally remove that animation altogether if you just want this thing to load to the actual content instantly as you do that. And also up at the top here, there is a menu where there's 3 different options, including home, which is the page we just been looking at, about, which if I click that, it brings up a little about us page where you can talk about yourself or your business. And then there's also one for our story. So perhaps if you want to talk more about what your company does or what you do, there's a bit more room here to go ahead and do that. And you will notice at the bottom here, there is also a footer with an email, address, phone number, and then a copyright with your company name. And up in the upper right hand corner, I should say, up here, there is a Twitter button as well as a Facebook button, so you can link off your social profiles. And I'll just go back to the homepage real quick because that's pretty much it for this theme. I think it should give you a pretty good idea of what to expect when you go in here and check this one out. There's also this buy button, which I noticed is also in the download when you pick this up. So you will have to go in and manually disable that because the buy button basically takes you to the Creative Market page to buy this theme, which I'm assuming when you're actually using this website, you won't want people to do unless you really want to support this author in a big way, in which case feel free to leave that buy button up there, but otherwise just make sure you take that out before you make this theme live. But that's it. If you think this theme is cool and you think you'll have some use for it, just be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. Next up is 50 high-res images of Tuscany. So this is a photo pack, and included in the download are 23 different images, although there are 50 of these in total, and the author says there should be a text document inside that you can go to and download the remaining images to make the total 50, although I got this item a little bit before they went live for free, and I didn't see that link in the download I got, but if you don't see that link in the download when you pick this up, perhaps leave a comment on this video or a comment on that page on the Creative Market website, which actually might be a bit more helpful, just to make sure you can go in and get all 50 of these different free photos. But there are 23 included in the download that I have, so I'm going to check out 5 of those at random here just to give you a good idea of what to expect. So first up, I'm going to go to image size to check out how big these are. So 6,000 by 4,000 pixels, which is plenty big for pretty much anything on the web, and also big enough to print out and still have a really nice resolution on them. So this is the first image, which is a really solid image, and I think when you check out all these that are included in the download, you'll see that the overall standard of photography is very high. These are very crisp and clear images, and also the lighting across all of them seems to be really well done and strongly handled, and there's some pretty cool effects here as well with these sun rays coming out. So overall, a nice and solid image to start out with here. And here's the second one. So once again, nice and vibrant colors, a very crisp and clear image, and a pretty cool setting for it as well. And here's the third one that I picked at random with a guy sitting in a field with some nice rolling hills in the background here. And here's the fourth one that I think is a pretty cool image. These hills, these rolling hills in front of it just have a neat texture to them, which I'm always drawn to because I just like neat textures, but there's also a nice house in the background as well as some more rolling countryside. And here is the fifth and final image that I'm going to show, which is a road with trees surrounding both sides. So that's it for the 5 images that I picked at random, but remember in the download itself there are 23, and there should be a README file inside the download that gives you a link to download the rest in order to get 50 total, which is a ton of images to pick from. So if you don't see that file, perhaps leave a comment on the Creative Market page, but if you do see it and you like these photos, be sure to go to link on that README file to download all these so you get the 50 total images. But that's it. If you like these photos and you think you'll have some use for them or ones like them, then just be sure to grab this pack this week. And last up is a bundle of 11 frame mockups. This is a collection of 11 different frame mockups providing both JPEG and PNG file formats, and I have the PNGs opened up inside Photoshop here to show, and the main difference between the JPEGs and the PNGs is that the PNGs have these frames knocked out for you, at least the center part of them where your artwork will go, so the masking work has already been done. Basically all you have to do is place your artwork behind the frame, and then it will automatically show through this frame right here. If you use the JPEG in the center here, it's a solid white, so you have to go in and mask them out before you can at least easily put your artwork in there, unless you're using a white background and you have some text with a transparent background, in which case that should be super easy to do regardless. So for file size with these, I'm gonna go to image and then image size, and you can tell that this is 4600 pixels wide by almost 3500 pixels high. So these are gonna be plenty big for pretty much anything on the web, which is I'm assuming is probably the main reason most people use these, but also it should be big enough to print out if you wanna go ahead and print some of these different things out to display in a store or whatever your use case might happen to be. And since there are 11, I'm just going to pretty quickly scroll through the different options included here so you can see everything that is part of this particular set. So as you can tell, there is one main factor that is throughout all these, and that are these different branches and leafy elements that are around it. But there's also things like a MacBook Pro right here as well as an iPhone, and that kind of varies depending on which mockup you use. So this one, for example, has some markers and paintbrushes as well as these pretty cool letters right here. So feel free to go through here and figure out which mockups work the best for the way you're trying to display whatever it is you're doing. But these all have a very nice and professional appearance in the way that these were laid out, as well as the actual quality of the photography itself. If I go in a little bit closer here to 100%, you can tell the sharpness of these photos is pretty darn good, so it should look good when you actually print this out as well. So this is the 10th one right here with a bunch of different leaves and branches around it, as well as some paintbrushes. And on this 11th one right here, which is actually a pretty simple layout, I just went ahead and took one of the wood textures from another free item this week and placed it behind the layer of this mockup right here. So I'll turn on the visibility just so you can see that it automatically masks it out because the center of that was knocked out to transparency. So then I can go ahead and select this image and move it around or resize it as I see fit. And it's really easy to go in there and do that, which is the benefit of using the PNG over the JPEGs. But feel free to use whatever file format you think will work best for you. But that's it for this pack. If you're on the hunt for some nice frame mockups with, in general, a nature and artistic setting around them, then these will be perfect for you. Just be sure to grab them this week. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you liked when you watched this video, just check out the description below this video where you'll find links to download each one of these 6 different free items. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thanks for watching.